This is why I have a lot of hope from Spider because, yeah, we can maintain our identity. We can make new webs. We can do all these things, and we are still genuinely the spider, authentically the spider, at the center of these webs.
Imagine yourself under a starry sky, around the warm glow of a sacred fire, where speakers gather to share their wisdom and insights. Creating a sacred space where all are welcome to warm their hands, here are your hosts, Caitlin Stormbreaker, Sarenth and Jim Two Snakes, discuss spirituality, mythology, animism, and culture around a virtual sacred fire.
Welcome.
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 Welcome. Won't you join us around Grandfather Fire?
Spirit of the coming spring, we feel your stirring. We feel the growth of roots starting to come alive. We hear the geese fly overhead. There's a smell in the air that says spring is on its way. We look forward to awakening with you, spirits of spring. We look forward to the warmth, the growth, the bloom of colors and flowers. Spirit of spring, we look forward to having you with us again, a welcoming embrace to the next part of the cycle of life. Oh, spirits of spring, beautiful flowers, wonderful animals, and sunshine. I look forward to you because you fill my heart and make me happy. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Around Grandfather Fire. You're listening to episode number 107. I'm Jim Two Snakes, joined as always by my good friends and co-hosts, Caitlin Stormbreaker and Sarenth Odinson. How are you guys both doing tonight?
Doing all right, I guess. I finally posted that first chapter, like I said I was going to do a year ago.
That's so awesome.
Far, I've gotten really good feedback on it, and I really don't know what to do with that information except a little happy dance. And I'm like,
yeah, right?
Okay. Yeah, that's
now. Where did you share it at, so all the listeners can go find it?
Hang on.
You don't have to have the exact link if you know, but just
it's on my WordPress.
It's on your WordPress. All right.
Yep, I'm actually considering creating a Substack, which is a writer's app that is similar to WordPress, but a little bit more user friendly, I think. And there are other things on Substack similar to what I'm posting.
Oh, very cool.
Stories and such and whatnot. So that one will be under a pseudonym, though you won't be able to find me under Storm there. But once I get that all figured out, I'll let you guys know, of course. But yeah, my mom read it and she fucking loved it, and she hates zombies.
Nice. That's so cool.
Yeah. She's like, honestly, I was a little trepidatious about reading this, but like, I really like it. This is good.
Mom approval. All right.
Yeah, there's nothing sweeter.
oh my God. Yeah, my mom is proud of me. Holy fucking shit. What do I do?
Keep writing.
That's really cool. So it's on her WordPress. So fearful or fearless listeners, go ahead down into the links on our show notes, and you can find Storm's WordPress site. So
that's awesome.
And how about you, Seth? How are you doing? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
That's fine. I got to scare the shit out of the kid while we were driving to school one morning. I should reiterate, while he was driving to school one morning, he's a very nervous driver and he's still learning. But my windshield wiper decided to just half-ass it when we were like a mile away from the school, and would fling randomly off of the windshield and get stuck out there. So he's got like torrential downpour on the windshield. And I was like, oh my God, shouting directions from the passenger seat, trying not to laugh because I knew that I could easily reach over and grab the steering wheel and keep him in a lane and not kill us, kind of thing. But yeah, I got that fixed today, so that's good.
That's an extra bonus. It's funny when you first start driving, like everything is so intimidating. Like, you can't have the radio too loud and you're white knuckling it and you just you're like, oh, and perhaps some of that fear is justified and we should probably maintain that. But the truth is, as you get older, you're like, screw it. I'm going to drink my coffee while sticking my arm out the window to unstick the windshield wiper on the highway.
While my knee is steering the steering wheel, I'm just going to flip that thing back on while I'm sipping that's... That was kind of me on the way home from that, because I had to keep like catching it from falling off of the side of the car and like pushing it back on the windshield. But at least it was an easy fix. So
yeah, well, that's good. That's good. How about you, Sarenth? How are you doing?
I am doing pretty good overall. I got some good sleep today after working a double. What I'm not looking forward to is the Holy Week for football.
Yeah, right.
Coming up this weekend with the Super Bowl Sunday. So I'm going to be volunteering for overtime so I don't get whacked on days where I don't want to work. So right before the vacation I'm taking for convocation, I'm going to be working a little bit more overtime than I'd planned because I did not remember we had Super Bowl coming up. So I'm going to be hopefully getting some overtime so I don't get stuck.
The Superb Owl is this weekend.
Oh my God, yeah. And I guess no teams that I really care about, but I think culturally speaking, it's always interesting how there's divisions of people who care about the Super Bowl in very specific ways. There are people who are like, I want to see the commercials. And then there's people who are really excited about the actual game, which, no shade to them. People enjoy their things.
And then there's people like me who just genuinely do not give a fuck about any of it.
My problem is that when it comes to anything football, baseball, hockey, I used to watch hockey a little bit with my grandpa and a little bit of football with my grandpa. But outside of those situations, I've never really watched anything. And I associate it with work. So I don't do that in my spare time. It's like, I'm good. I used to work day shift, and that's like the majority of what the patients used to watch was either MTV or the Super Bowl, or not Super Bowl, but
football.
Football in general.
Yes,
just sports ball.
And like, it's interesting because over time, like, I've kind of softened a little bit. Like, I had a visceral distaste for all things sports, but I've had a couple of sports fans show up in my life, and you're one of them, Jim. Like. Your love of professional wrestling is something that over time I've kind of softened on because I never used to like it. And then I saw what changed my perspective on it was when you kind of turned me from looking at it as just a bunch of goofy asses and leotards throwing each other around a ring to think of it like a soap opera.
Right. It really is. It really is. And some of the scripts are better than others. Yes, I know it's scripted. I like it anyway. The Bourne Identity movies were scripted too. I like those.
I mean, it's all entertainment.
Didn't just walk up and just bitch slap a bunch of security guards because he felt like it. Damn, that's disappointing. I thought he was authentic.
I thought that was a documentary.
I probably won't end up watching it because I'll be at work. I might catch some highlights here and there, but I don't have a huge love of, or attachment to either of the teams. I will tell everybody that I'm rooting for Kansas City because I think the Philadelphia Eagles are just a bunch of criminals on the field. I ain't scared of Philly. I live outside of Detroit. Yeah, close enough, relatively. But
I mean, arguably, where you live is like a shade darker and more dangerous than where Sarenth and I live, because like we are technically closer to Detroit, but your neck of the woods is a little more scary than our neck of the woods.
Well,
when we were out there, we pulled into a parking lot to meet up with a friend of ours, and when we got home, his tire was flat, and we found a bullet casing in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. Yeah. It's a great town.
That has never happened while we were out here. But it happened when we went to your neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's hilarious that the one time we find a bullet lodged in the car, it's not near Detroit, it's near Jackson.
Well, we were Prison City for a reason. So, yeah.
So overall,
awesome.
I've been pretty good. I've just been doing my thing, working the OT, but I've also been incorporating a lot more personal spirit work, more time in my breaks, and a lot more time at home.
Nice
to take time out for me, which has been really nice. Definitely recommend Gununga Gap mantra work for anybody that is so called.
Oh, cool.
It has been even 10 minutes a day really kind of is a hard reset. And just connecting with that gaping maw, the yawning void, whatever interpretation you wish to go for.
Holy shit, there's nothing here.
This is great.
It's full of everything and nothing. Fuck.
So quiet, and there's that nice ambient white noise.
Right.
It's really feeling peace in that paradox. One of the mantras I came up with to work with it was, I am the balance of fire and ice.
Oh, nice.
And that feels very good.
Also a Game of Thrones prequel. No.
Look, the son of a bitch better finish the actual fucking book series.
Yeah.
Well, there's belief that he won't, because he's already cashed in all of his money, and his house really isn't that great. So
Plus, he's written himself into a corner.
Yeah, and he wrote himself into a corner. I just kind of gave up on them. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Literally, I have 2 standing characters that I like that are still alive, and I know the one makes it to the end, and the other one is pretty close to death at the end of the book that I'm currently on. And I'm like, you know what? I'm done. For all I care, they both live, and the kingdom burns to the fucking ground.
Aging Brandon Sanderson. We have another series for you to finish.
Right, no shit.
I really need to read that dude's stuff, because I keep hearing that it's
so
really good. But
so good.
I'm kind of like you on that front, where like I didn't read Pratchett for years.
Yeah.
Years. And I stumbled onto Neil Gaiman. I didn't know how much of a following he had. I just picked up a random book and was like, this looks interesting. Yep. And then I walked into the fandom and was like, holy fucking shit.
Wow. Oh, I feel the same way. When I picked up American Gods, had no clue. None. Yeah. What about you, Jim?
Yeah, how are you?
How are you?
Doing pretty good. Everything overall is going pretty good. Got a wedding anniversary to celebrate tomorrow, which is also the day we celebrate Valets, or I celebrate Valets. So it's kind of
Are you saying you found your wife in the underworld?
Not saying I don't.
Much love to you, Angie.
And next weekend, I may have signed up to become a shop steward for the union at my workplace. I seemingly can't stop volunteering for shit.
You have 3 jobs now, is what I'm hearing.
Well,
I am proud of you. Please be careful.
Union proud.
I am too. I get it. My own union's been trying to recruit me for some stewardship position, and I've been resistant to it so far.
I've already been on several nonprofits and stuff, so this will be old hat.
That's a very good point. I may have to.
Yeah, my husband's a union rep for Ford, so this is all I've been hearing about for the last 2.5 or almost 3 years now.
Solidarity forever.
And I know that what you're going to deal with, Jim, isn't even a drop in the bucket of what he deals with, but dear God, I hope it's so much easier on you than it is on him.
Oh, God, yes.
Man.
Yeah, auto plant seems like a really hard place to deal with it.
But the most important place to have one.
Yeah, right. But
because of how often he has to fight bosses.
But for your case, yeah. Like for your case, though, I I hope it's an easier gig, and I hope that it's satisfying.
It'll be all right. I think from the material I've been reading, a good chunk of it would be, meeting with supervisors and people that are having a dispute. And I'm like, gee, I've never moderated anything before.
Nope.
This will be brand new.
That's not your skill set whatsoever.
That's right.
You're fucked. Good luck, Jim.
But yeah, that's what I've been up to. So, and like you, Sarenth, been doing a little bit more personal spiritual work. I've been trying to find more time to meditate and just kind of doing my thing. So
that's awesome.
Yeah,
how's that been going for you?
Oh, not too bad. Not too bad. You got to take the freedom to reinvent yourself sometimes and reinvent your practice. That's really what it boils down to. And it's not like I'm totally reinventing the wheel, but, I think actually that's probably, if you guys don't mind, that's probably a pretty good dovetail into our topic for today, if you wouldn't mind. So we're doing something a little bit different tonight for our listeners. We do a lot of interviews and we do a lot of shows where we answer listener questions, but we decided this episode, we were going to actually tackle a topic, something that came up a couple times on the Around Grandfather Fire Discord. And so tonight we're just kind of going to riff a little bit on authenticity and what that means to us as individuals and how we think it applies to spiritual practice. It's something that you hear a lot, especially in certain spaces, about being your authentic self. But what the hell does that even mean? So we thought we would talk about that a little. And I think I'm going to let Sarenth kind of lead off on this, lead bat on this, because when we started thinking about this topic, he wrote a really interesting piece for his blog, or at least I'm assuming it's interesting from the feedback. I did not read it on purpose so we could have a fresh conversation about this, but I think I'm going to let you kind of do lead off batting position here, Sarenth, and kind of tell us where you're coming from on this topic.
All right. So I actually could just read this so you know where my positions are at. Especially for those who like your blog posts are too long, can't read it. I'm fine with that. The thing about it is that sometimes I have to process through my hands. And for me, writing is a big part of how I process. So when Robin originally asked this question, it was like, she was asking a series of really excellent questions. What does authenticity mean to you? How do you relate to authenticity? Do you think you're authentic most of the time, mentally, emotionally, and physically? And I was, just that line of questioning made me sit back and go, shit. But then she followed up with, who do you share the most authentic version of yourself to? Do you live your authentic self? Do you care for and nurture your authenticity? Why or why not? And what stage of the journey do you feel you're in? You don't have to answer this one. I mean, yeah, like, damn. Like, what do you wish you could share, or what do you wish you could live? And you feel you can't. Why? So, per my usual, I first looked to the Oxford English Dictionary for definitions.
Right. What does this mean according to the dictionary?
And the thing that I like about dictionaries in general is that there's prescriptivist, right? They're like, this is how we use language now. And it'll tell you, the first one is not false or copied. It's genuine, real, and authentic antique is the example they use. Having an origin supported by unquestionable evidence, authenticated, verified, and authentic document of the Middle Ages. Representing one's true nature or beliefs, true to oneself or the person, identified a story told in authentic voice of like a Midwestern farmer, a senator's speech that sounds authentic. So representing your true nature or beliefs. Mm-hmm. Entitled to acceptance or belief because of agreement with known facts or experience, like reliable or trustworthy. An authentic report on poverty in Africa, which is a very interesting example to use. 5 is law, executed with all formalities, an authentic deed, for instance. And then with music, it's of a church mode having a range extending from final to octave above compared to plagal, of a cadence consisting of a dominant harmony followed by a tonic. I don't usually work with this definition because I'm not in that kind of musical mode. Mm-hmm. The obsolete form of it, which I think is interesting, is that the obsolete definition is that authoritative.
Oh, huh. Yeah. I kind of see that. Yeah. I could kind of see that.
I find it really interesting that the definition that has fallen the most out of use is authority granted by authenticity.
That is interesting.
I find that very apropos given where we're at in today's day and age. Do you want to sit and reflect on this, or do you want me to keep going?
Oh, we can. I'm kind of interested in that one because.
Sorry. Surprised by a stink bug showing up on my desk under my hand.
Was it an authentic stink bug? Has it been vetted and verified?
No,
actually, kind of.
Bastard disappeared.
I do actually kind of. I do actually find that interesting as well because authoritative, can mean like what, verified by a figure of authority or possessing some sort of authority, and I do find that interesting because a lot of times it seems to me that authenticity can be used as a scapegoat for responsibility, especially in spiritual spaces. Oh, I was just being my authentic self. No, you're kind of being a douche canoe. So,
yeah. Authenticity is sometimes an active component of spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And it is really interesting how people will be like, well, this is what I authentically believe. Okay, but have you considered that what you authentically believe is full of holes and or is total horseshit?
Mm-hmm. Or makes you a complete fucking asshole racist that deserves to be punched in the face.
Right.
See the white supremacist problem in heathenry. Yes,
exactly. Exactly.
Yes, you can authentically hold that the AFA is a good organization, and I authentically hold that you should no longer be part of the heathen community.
I kind of like those. I went a similar route. I looked at the dictionary terms a little bit. I found some other lists that I thought were kind of interesting, or a couple of other definitions. Mindtools.com had one that said authenticity means you're true to your own personality, values, and spirit, regardless of the pressure that you're put under to act otherwise, which I thought was an interesting definition.
Yeah, I before you go on, Jim, I read that one too, because like I said before the stream, I had one hell of a week and haven't had much time to put too much thought to this topic. Mm-hmm. I did, however, have time to look up a few definitions just to like kind of get my brain somewhere close to the mark. And I had a very interesting thought that I wanted to run by you guys, considering that definition of authenticity. So if somebody is, for example, a villain, is a douche canoe, is an asshole, could they still be considered an authentic individual if they are being true to who they really are?
Yes, absolutely. And
that was my thought too.
I mean,
like,
it actually,
authenticity isn't always a good thing. It's how it's presented.
Yes, exactly.
Lawful good does not mean lawful nice.
Yes.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That doesn't, it brings up one of the questions I have for later, which is like, at what point in time can authenticity work against you, and what can be against your best interests long term,
or the best interests of those around you? Like, even
right,
though you
of
are
your
being
society,
authentic,
culture.
Yeah, if you're being authentic to who you are, but actively hurting the people around you, then maybe you should take a look at that.
Yes. Agreed.
And authenticity, being authentic to self, does not give you a pass to be an asshole. It's like those people that put all that weight on their zodiac sign, like, oh, well, I'm just a Scorpio, so, whatever. Like,
I'm a Sagittarius and I can't make plans.
We're right. That definitely ties into a lot of that bypassing too.
Yeah,
that whole, it's not my fault, I was being authentic, like we were saying. So the other definitions that I liked, and this is a 4-part one. This is from Michael Kiernes and Brian Goldman, It's an authenticity inventory developed in the year 2000, which is comprised of 4 key factors: self-awareness, which is defined as the knowledge of and trust in one's own motives, emotions, preferences, and abilities. 2, unbiased processing, which is a clarity in evaluating your strengths and your weaknesses without denial or blame. 3, behavior, acting in ways congruent to your own values and needs, even at the risk of criticism or rejection. And 4, relational orientation, close relationships which inherently require openness and honesty. Those were the 4 key factors that they defined, which I thought that was a great list too, because I can definitely see all kinds of factors in there with spirituality, society, family, all this other stuff. They seem to have that's a pretty well fleshed out list, I thought.
I think, especially in an age where we now have active commodification and the development of monetary relationships through parasocial relationships, understanding authentic relationships is more important than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those 4 could be a pretty good guide as to whether or not you're having an authentic relationship with a person, whereas it could just be a mediated relationship. It's something that every content creator has to watch out for. Are you being authentic to yourself? Are you being who you are to your audience? Are you being authentically you to the people that you live with?
Right.
There are cases where, especially some of these YouTubers that make it really big, people say, well, their personality really changed when they became all about their YouTube business or whatever, because they stopped being the authentic person they knew and became what they assumed they had to be for their job.
Right. Exactly.
That is a dangerous rabbit hole to fall down, where you're no longer authentically living yourself and you fooled yourself into thinking this is authentically you. So much of this conversation is something that I think back to when, Storm, you've talked about your experiences through yoga and bringing along ego with you as opposed to fighting with it.
It's kind of the idea of letting the monkey mind and whatever's chattering there in the background, letting that fall away and stepping into your quote unquote authentic self, your true self, whether or not you know what that is, whether or not you know what those values are, whether or not you know what those ethics or morals or whatever, whether or not if you know what those are, you are taking that intentional step forward to step into that authentic self. And that starts with the body. This starts with the physical form, sitting down into the physical form, really feeling your toes, really feeling your calf muscles, maybe even feeling the hair on your legs, really getting to know what that physical form is. And then those values, those ethics, those morals, those whatevers will begin to arise. And you'll realize that you have some that are stronger than others. And there is actually a practice in yoga that helps you develop and strengthen these things and come into better alignment with them, is where you start a yoga practice with the intention of engaging this value, this feeling, this moral, this ethic, whatever it is. And you hold that in your heart and you don't necessarily contemplate it, but you return to it again and again. And you feel that through your body, through your movements, and you look at it. If you're in tree pose and suddenly tree pose is really difficult because you're looking at ahimsa, which is non-harming, or, non-harming kindness, basically. And you're standing in tree pose and you're like, man, this is really hard. And you realize, oh, my ankle kind of hurts right now. I should be authentic to this value and come out of tree pose right now because my ankle is in pain.
Interesting. So authenticity is literally physically embodied through the spiritual practice of yoga.
that's how it starts. And then once you grow it through that physical practice of yoga, you start seeing it show up more and more in your outside life as well, because there is no differentiation between the two.
Excellent. Okay, that's where I was hoping you'd go with that. So in
Yeah.
order to be spiritually authentic, you have to be physically authentic, and vice versa.
Correct. And at least in the way that I understand it, but I am a very physically attuned individual. That is where a lot of my ability and my powers lie.
So question then, can there be a conflict of authenticity? Can you have two authentic things within you that are conflicting? So if my ankle is hurting from tree pose, do I be authentic to that pain and shift out of that pose? But maybe my personality, my authentic personality, is one that wants to overcome perseverance. So I want to persist. Can there be a conflict of authenticity?
Not with pain. I would say not with pain, because pain in yoga is not a good thing and leads to injury. That sort of conflict is something that needs to be looked at and observed and ask. You need to ask yourself if this, I want to overcome this, is actually an authentic feeling and not a sort of toxified or oxidized authentic feeling, where it has become a little too heavy. If you're in a pose and you're like, okay, I want to be kind to my body, and you find that the pose is difficult or challenging and you want to back out of it, that is an opposition, because you're like, I'm not in pain, but this is really challenging and I'm afraid of it. So you need to counter it with, I should stay in it and see what's here. And that's where that I'm going to overcome this fear and find the strength in that and oppose that fear, that feeling, with that confidence of, I can get through this.
I really like that answer. I think that gives a lot of insight for people that might be questioning whether they're acting authentically or not. Because if we extrapolate that out beyond physical conditions or beyond things like yoga, it might come into physical limitations of one's own body or chronic things, or it might even just be a conflict in an emotional or a mental state or something. I think you can probably extrapolate that out and have that same approach of trying to resolve that.
Yeah, I think some of our more authentic traits can actually be found in the negative emotions that we feel, like using fear, for example. Courage is often always on its coattails, and courage is not a being absent of fear. It is a being that perseveres through the fear in spite of it and keeps going. But if you only stop at that fear and you never go beyond it or look inside of it and go, what else is here? Then you'll never find that courage. You'll never find that authentic part of yourself that is just screaming out to be found and going, look at me, look at how cool I am, I can help you. I think that's a method of finding an authentic emotion or feeling or value or moral or whatever, is looking into those more negative aspects.
See, I love this conversation because this conversation, as we're having it, takes a completely different tack from what I wrote. I really appreciate you being willing to dig into that, because it's something that I struggle with as a person with chronic illness, as a person with a desire to do more with my physical body, but not as much opportunity. I work 16 hours a day. I'm blown once I get off shift, even though my shifts oftentimes are very just long. I don't have a lot of mental and physical ability to go out to the gym afterwards, sleep, and then go back to work for another 16. It's just not going to happen if I want to function. So being authentic to the needs of my body requires me putting aside an authentic desire to do more in lieu of what my body is authentically telling me. If you don't do this, I'm going to shut down. Speaking to that conflict between authentic desire versus what your body can authentically let you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think our bodies are the most authentic teachers that we have, especially those of us with chronic pain. I mean, you guys know I will work my body into the dirt if I allow myself to.
Yeah.
And I developed an injured back because of it. And it was because of that injured back that I realized that I was not being authentic to my own existence here on this planet. I had to take that hit to my ego, my inflated ego, thinking, oh, I can do this. I'm a big, strong lady, man. You know, I can do these things. No big deal. My body's like, haha, fuck you, bitch. And I listened.
Did your body give you much of a choice?
No, she did not.
I think, yeah, I think that's a really important thing to point out too, is that if you're not living authentically, something oftentimes will come along and align you.
Or at least try to repeatedly. Yeah. And sometimes rather harshly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so difficult, maybe question based off of that, and we might not be the right people to answer it. So I'm willing to admit ignorance on this part. How does this align when we're talking about things like gender roles, where you might not authentically feel in agreement with the physical structures of your body?
I am going to respectfully say that I don't know if I can actually answer this question because I've never experienced that before. I've never had that feeling. I have asked those who have struggled with that and those who have accepted and changed their body to be closer to what they feel they authentically are.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I can speak kind of to that. I think first we should try to unpack what feeling authentic is.
That's fair, because that's a great approach, I think, because I likewise would say I probably don't have the answer to that, but I offered it just as an example of a time when the body might not be the ultimate authenticity.
That's a fair pushback on that. In that case, I think you would turn more to what the spirit or the mind is saying versus what the body is saying. But even then, it is the body that is speaking. It's saying, this is not right.
Fair. Very fair.
It is the body that is saying, these pieces are not in the right place, or this is not how this is supposed to be.
That's very fair. You were going to say something, Sarenth?
I don't believe that I have the qualifications to speak on behalf of my trans and non-binary siblings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I can speak to is coming out as pansexual was a mental, physical, and spiritual process that I had to undergo before I could be authentically me. And following certain gods has challenged my notions of my gender and sexuality. I still am at least performatively cis enough that I still identify as cis, but I have been shaky on that on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
There's this funny phenomenon in queer spaces where they say if you don't feel like you belong in a queer space, just wait, because that questioning of am I queer enough to be here is sometimes an indicator that you're queer enough to be here. And I think that it made me laugh at the time, but I think it's very true that every queer person, whether whatever part of the spectrums that they happen to fall upon, or I fell upon, there was always that questioning period, because when you've been set that this is the authentic normal TM, and then you have to understand yourself in contrast to physical reality, social reality, mental reality, spiritual reality. I may be physically cis male embodied, but that is certainly not all I have been and not all that I am. And my mind really opened up to this particular reality when Freya came into my life, really made me grapple with my pansexuality. But then in the same blow, I was learning Sather, and I was learning some of the history behind some of the terms that men especially would carry, Ergi and Arger among them. And it made me really grapple with at the time, am I fully, not only I'm not straight, but am I actually a man? And what the past is dialoguing, to borrow a term from Tyson Yunkaporter and Rune Hjarno Rasmussen, the past is dialoguing with me in a way that is making me question my gender identity and still fucks with my head on this regard. And I can't be my authentic self by saying I'm just cis, and that I'm continuously figuring it out in contrast to the spiritual experiences I have with this work. I will say concretely, at the moment, I feel cis enough.
That's fair.
But, I have to leave the door open for change because I don't know.
Right. That's fair. I do want to throw out there that this is not a scripted episode, so I had no idea that even I was going to say such or pose such a question 10 minutes ago. So if you're one of our amazing listeners that might have some insight into this that we should explore a little bit deeper, feel free to drop us an email, say something in the Discord, or we would really welcome following the link in our show notes, and you can leave us a voicemail, and we would be glad to have those additional insights. I don't know if I can go too much further in that topic but I am kind of glad it came up because it is something that is kind of interesting and I would like more insight into.
I'm more comfortable talking about authenticity when it comes to things like allyship, for instance, with the queer communities, because Harry Potter is an active football right now and it's part of the discourse.
Right.
And the questions of, can you authentically be an ally and still enjoy Harry Potter versus are you giving money to Harry Potter merchandise, for instance? And so there's these active conversations of authenticity around, well, are you using fig leaves as cover for what you just want to do? Are you actually being an ally in the way that your trans and queer siblings are telling you, in the way that your trans and queer community members are telling you? And so there's questions of authenticity going all the way around. And I've actually had to shut TikTok off several times because there gets to a certain point where I'm like, I've had enough of this conversation to where I know where I stand on this. And I got to step back for my own mental health because some of this is getting fucking nasty. And I'm not actually pointing at my trans and queer siblings on this one. A lot of cisgendered folks are up in their feels, especially white cisgendered folks are up in their feels about this to the point where they are hate buying this game. And I'm like, okay, you are authentically being a dick. Cool. Glad to know where you are. You're getting blocked. Right.
Yep. You are literally walking your talk there, asshole. Thanks.
It gets so that
you're an asshole. Maybe if you're an asshole, maybe you're shitting your shirt.
I mean, it reminds me of something that both Martin Luther King and Malcolm X both talked about with white moderates at various points. At the very least, if you've got a loud, angry racist in your face, you know where the knife is.
Right.
But the liberals who will talk nice to your face but stick the knife in your back, you never know when that's going to come. So, there's also that level of authenticity that we're actively at play with in this country as well.
I do want to. I don't know if we should circle back to the next part of your piece, Sarenth, or we want to tackle. Storm even posed the question, "What does it mean to feel authentic?" Which I think is an interesting question. So
that's a lot. How do you like it though?
How do you guys want to tackle this? You want to go with the question?
I mean, might as well, because we're kind of going off of the coattails of where that question came from.
Okay, sure.
For me, and guys, yoga is my foundation. It's what I keep going back to. But there's this certain sureness, I guess, or assuredness that comes when I know that I am standing within my authentic self. And when I'm acting to the values that I enjoy, or the ones that I hold the highest, or the ones that I believe are the ones that make me at least a decent person. I know a lot of you guys out there like me, and I really appreciate that, but I'm working on liking myself more. Okay, getting there. I will say I'm not authentic in that part of my life. But it's almost a perfect fit, if that makes sense, when I am standing within my authentic self. Especially when it comes to when I'm doing that practice in yoga and I'm working with an aspect or an intention, and I go into a certain pose, there is a moment when everything just clicks and it falls right into place, and my feet are in the right place, my hands are in the right place, the muscles are exactly where they need to be, and I almost feel like I'm floating, like it's effortless, that there is no resistance, there is no anything pushing back. Because if you meet a truly authentic person, somebody who really knows who the fuck they are, you almost stand in awe of them because of how many fake motherfuckers are out there. I mean, every day you encounter people who have their customer service voice. You know, we all know it. I have it. You guys have it. But you meet that one person that there is no customer service voice because they don't give a fuck. This is who they are. And there's literally 2 people that I can think of that were truly authentic individuals that I have known in my life. And just being in their presence, I was lucky enough to be friends with both of them. I was just like, wow, that I aspire to be that, whatever that is. I don't know how to get to that, but I'm working on it. That's what being authentic feels to me, is like it effortless, I guess. To boil that down to a single word, I find it effortless.
I find it very interesting that in a society that's so performative, we have to look for the real that hard.
It's true. It's sad, but it's very true.
I think, damn.
Wow, Sarenth, I feel like I've punched you in the gut a few times tonight.
So the question is then, if you feel they're being authentic, would they agree with that sentiment?
I don't know. I'd have to ask them. I can't comfortably answer that question.
Right. Well, and the reason I kind of bring that up is that is actually one of the things that hit me the hardest when I was researching this myself was a quote. I don't even remember where I got it from, but it said, most can't really know who their authentic self is because there's already so much that people repress and disassociate from. The disconnected factors of the mind make it very difficult to actually know yourself. What most people might consider being authentic might actually be a mask of what you perceive your ideal self to be like. The people who strive the most for authenticity may actually be furthest from it.
So this is something that I have encountered in my work with Dionysus and Odin, both in different ways. With Othin, it has been a building up and also a tearing down of the masks that get in the way of true expression. And sometimes that is a mask of civility that we wear in order to not eat each other. Sometimes it is the mask of realpolitik versus the desired thing that I would like to do. With Othin, these questions of civility versus bestial nature tend to come up. With Dionysus, I find that does come up, but it comes up in a very different fashion. Much of my work with Dionysus has been about embracing the mask as an authentic expression. as somebody that has recently really hard questioned whether or not I'm actually non-neurotypical in a new way. So I know I've got an ADHD diagnosis, and the comorbidities and the things that I'm seeing in my expressions and masking, I eventually broke down and talked to my primary care physician and was like, hey, what do you think about me going and getting an autism diagnosis? And she actually warned me not to do it. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one is it costs anywhere from $500 to $700 for an adult diagnosis, and finding a specialist in my area is a pain in the ass. For two, you can actually lose rights in this country because of an autism diagnosis. So she didn't come right out and say it, but she's like, if you embrace that diagnosis and it's on your record, there are things that you will suffer because of it.
Yeah, I've actually had many conversations with a friend recently that was talking about how within the autism community, self-diagnosis is so much more accepted than it used to be, or maybe it is amongst other communities. I'm not sure how I would frame that properly, but it's very well accepted within the autistic communities because if you're self-diagnosed, there's not some of those repercussions that you were talking about, and B, not everybody can afford, can manage, can get and some of the diagnose, and so it's very, from what I've been told, it's very well accepted within the autistic communities for self-diagnosis for a lot of those same factors. And so, yeah, I think that's a valid point. I mean, where does autism, or where does masking, I should say, affect authenticity, or doesn't it? Or when can it be a good thing? Those are valid questions to ask.
So, I mean, I will definitely credit the theater with giving me tools to mask properly in ways, because before I went into theater in high school, I can definitely see there was a divide between who I was then and who I was afterwards. In a very big way, theater taught me how to mask in a way that is acceptable to neurotypical people. Who knew a queer, neurodivergent, friendly space where everybody gets to be their true self until you go on stage? Interesting. And this is why I say that a lot of the lessons that Dionysus has taught me over the course of my life has to do with authentically performing. In one of his divine forms, he is a mask on a pole. And if that is a true form of Dionysus, then in a real sense, if I am actually choosing to embody a mask so that I can exist in everyday life, it may be exhausting. It may cost me a lot of spoons, but I can still authentically be myself while masking, and still be my authentic self when I come home, take a sigh of relief, take the mask off, and I get to be Sarenth at home. I don't think that masking makes me inauthentic. It just makes me able to survive in a neurotypical world.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think that if you are using a mask or any other coping mechanism for a myriad of problems, just like listening to pain from your body and adjusting is authentic, so is protecting your mental or emotional health. That is still authentic. Even
I'm glad you tied those in, because that's exactly where I was going to go.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes sense to me completely.
Well, and even then, when you were talking about masking, Sarenth, I started thinking about the people still in the broom closet, quote unquote. You have to mask when you go home to interact with those families, but you can still be authentically you, but just with a different mask on yourself, because you are protecting that area of your authenticity in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very hard for me to kind of wrap my brain around it. But I do agree that if you have to mask, and if it's, for survival, for protection, for whatever, I I think being fully, authentically, truly to that mask is a way that you can still be authentic in a way, I guess. But that kind of counteracts that one definition that you read earlier, Jim,
Yes.
to where no matter under what pressures you are being the person you have to be. But we also have to think about how dangerous our world is for certain individuals. So if you are in the LGBTQ plus community, or a person of color, or even just on the fringes of the main people that run this country, you run the risk of danger and you have to have a mask.
Well, a common thing that you will encounter with folks is code switching. And these are the words that I use around, like, a lot of my Black friends would switch their verbiage when they were in the presence of white folks that they didn't know versus those they did. Mm-hmm. And it was like, when I was growing up, that was just a thing you did. We didn't call it code switching. We were just like, this is how you talk to somebody who's in your group.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. This is how you talk to somebody outside of it, because if you talk to them like that, bad things happen.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, I agree with that. I actually, that's a good pushback on that one definition. And I agree with it completely, because what we're talking about actually was one of the questions I had, and taking out of the less dire circumstances into something smaller in some ways is like, can you be authentic but polite? Do little white lies, the grease of social interaction, does that make you an inauthentic person?
Oh boy.
I think it depends greatly on your definition of authenticity.
All right.
And I think it depends on your definition of white lies.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And who you're talking to. I am not a fan of lies, period. Whether they're white lies or otherwise. I would rather tell the truth in a gentle way or say nothing at all than tell somebody a white lie.
Oh, this is...
But that's who I am.
No,
I think we would all prefer that, but can we actually survive that? Can we actually do that? That's a much harder challenge.
My upbringing was very, you tell the truth. Mm-hmm. You tell the truth, you're honest, da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I got out into the real world and started working with people and realized just how little people want to hear honesty and how hard they will push back. I've had the exact opposite reaction, where people have been genuinely taken aback by my honesty and they feel refreshed after I have engaged with them. Like, I don't tell them in a brutal way. I'm not like calling them out on their bullshit and being a douche about it. I find either a gentle way to tell the truth, or I say, I don't want to talk about that right now and move on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we're back to what you said earlier, Kaylin, about customer service voice. If a customer comes up to me and says, "Can you show me where sump pumps are?" and I go, "Fucking no, I'm busy," I'd be completely authentic and honest in that moment, but it ain't going to go over very well.
Right. But what I'm talking about when I'm saying when I tell people the truth, I would not say, "No, I'm fucking busy right now." I would honestly, in that moment, I wouldn't consider lying to them or saying, "No, I don't want to do that." I would genuinely show them where they're at because I'm a helpful person. Mm-hmm. That's who I am authentically. But
I think my answer would be even more legalistic. Yes, I can show you where they're at. If you ask if I want to, fuck no.
Absolutely not. But here, follow me.
Okay, so then we start getting into this weird territory too, where like
semantics are fun.
Well, not only semantics, but like even your facial expressions. Mm-hmm, they can lie, they can betray you, they can say something different than your mouth is saying. So, which is the authentic truth? Is authentic authentic and truth aren't necessarily the same things. We already said that, right?
Mhm.
Right.
So does that automatically mean that authentic and those little social adjustments can be correct as well?
Yes and no. This is where masking gets to be a pain in the ass, because
So-
I have had, like, some people will say I've got resting bitch face, and it's like, no, you don't want it to express.
Fair.
Like, there are some people who just genuinely go through life and they're scowling because that's how they feel on the inside. And then there's some people for whom that face expression that people think they're just being grumpy all the time.
Mhm.
No, they might just be thinking.
Yeah, no,
Right.
this is
Yeah,
just
exactly.
my
This is
face.
very true. Yeah, we definitely get into that territory with
You were going to
masking.
say something, Storm. I'm sorry.
Well, to go off of what you were asking, and I know what my answer is, but do you think that you are acting authentic towards yourself by upholding and practicing all of the values that you consider to be authentic and good or whatever all the time? Because to me, that would be fucking exhausting to try to uphold all of those traits all the fucking time and make sure that I'm courageous and joyful and kind and all of this bullshit that is out. I'm sorry. I'm a little excited. I didn't mean bullshit. It's awesome.
Nah, you're good.
It's great. It's amazing. But that's kind of where masking comes in, I feel.
Right.
And that's why I think masking is an authentic practice.
Mhm.
And to kind of go back to your, if a customer comes up to me and asks me where the sub pumps are and I say, no, go fuck yourself kind of thing, you're not really being authentic to yourself, right? Even though you really want to say that and you don't want to lie to them being like, hey, yeah, here, let me help you go find this over here. You're still being authentic to that helpful part of yourself because that is the mask that you're wearing while you're at work. Jim, you are a helpful person. Throughout every aspect of your life, you kind of always have been ever since I've known you, at least.
Mhm.
So that to me is not a white lie. You are being authentic to yourself because you are helping a customer do this thing.
That's fair.
The customer service voice comes in when you are dealing with an unruly customer. And yes, you would want to tell them to go fuck themselves because they're being an asshole. You smile and you go, thank you. May I have some more, please?
I think there's an interesting dichotomy here. I worked retail for 4 years.
That's it. God, you're fucking lucky.
Sure, we'll call it lucky. The 2008 recession hit.
Jesus.
So I had several situations where the hardest to deal with customers weren't the people who were expecting. I worked at Babies R Us for 4 years. And the hardest to deal with customers were not the people who were expecting. It was the mother-in-laws, usually.
Yeah. Yep.
God's help them. They were trying their best.
Were they, or were they just being bitches?
They were authentically trying to do what they thought was the right thing. And I was authentically trying to get them the fuck out of my store. There were times where, so customer service voice is an intermediary. It is, I would say for the most part, like customer service voice and other forms of masking and code switching and things like that, aren't you being inauthentic. It's you putting on a mask so that you can interact with this person in a healthy way. Because there were times where I'm like, ma'am, I have gone over the consumer safety reports with you. I know which of these is the most safe. I literally just talked with the safety inspector yesterday on how to properly install a car seat. You're overpaying. But if you feel that these are better for your child or your grandson or whomever, great. I will happily sell you an overpriced plus $200 to the price tag of this lesser model. I will happily sell it to you. I don't make commission. I don't give a shit. I'm an hourly employee. But if you want a genuinely, authentically good car seat, this one in the middle will actually serve your purpose. No, I want the one with all the bells and whistles. Okay. Like, real talk, at this point, you don't give a shit about the baby safety. You want to look like a good grandparent. That's fine. I know what part of you I'm talking with at that point. I am not talking to the rational mind. I am talking to a person who wants an emotional reaction when she delivers this car seat. Not, hey, I found you something that's good enough, which is fine. Mm-hmm. She is sitting in her authenticity and being a bitch, and that's understandable. She's excited. She's real excited. And she's taking out this frustration on me. I am not paid enough for this shit, but okay. Yes, ma'am, I can get that to the front for you. Would you also like to buy a protection plan? What does it do? Not a goddamn thing. Would you still like it? I'm supposed to try to sell it to you. I have literally had that exact conversation with a person before, and she just stared at me, and I said, look, it doesn't cover acts of God, and your car seat is usually covered through your car insurance. You're not buying it for anything. They make me sell this to you. Wow, why are you being so honest? Because I fucking hate this program. Wow, why are you swearing? Because you asked me for a brutally honest answer and I gave it to you.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, if somebody opens the door for you to be your authentic self, they don't get to bitch when you be your authentic self after you have given them several tries to say, I would like to get off this ride. For me, being authentic to myself is being like, okay, look, I will give you the sugar-coated version that you probably have an easier time swallowing. But if you ask me enough, I will happily take the mask off and let you really know how I feel. Because if you don't want those filters, that's fine. I can still be an authentic person with these filters in place. You might deal with the response better.
Yeah, that's fair. I think we deal with a lot of that in the spiritual community as well.
Absolutely.
But that just brings up the point. So many spiritual places that you go, like if you look up authenticity quotes, you'll get all the new agey sort of authenticity quotes, and they almost always are about breaking the rules and living true to no matter what others think, and but from what we're talking about it, that is a very portional definition of what authenticity would be.
Yeah. So I think one of the 4 points that I think you brought up, Jim, was relational.
Relational. Yep. I think that's something you hit on your piece too, right?
I did. I think that there is the hyper individualistic mode of authenticity is sometimes at total loggerheads with being an authentic community member.
Yes.
I have had occasions where I have had an extreme reaction to something that somebody has said, and I tamp it down, not because what I have to say doesn't matter or I want to be inauthentic, but if my authentic goal is to foster grith and frith, good peace and social order, grith is temporarily extended if you're trying to have a dialogue between two parties that might be fighting or two parties that don't usually talk. Frith is something I hold with people who are in my community. Good peace and social order. You come into my house, you eat my food, you drink my water, you are under frith. So in order to live authentically, there are times where tamping down on my immediate knee-jerk reactions is more authentic in my role as a community member, whether I'm a leader or I'm just in the milieu. That is more authentically me, of tamping down my immediate response in lieu of community peace. It's not me lying. It's me saying they don't need the brunt of my emotional reaction.
I wouldn't consider that act a lie. I would consider that act as protecting the community in a way.
Ooh.
Not necessarily protecting them from you, but protecting them from damage, I guess, unintentional inflicted damage.
Mm-hmm.
I guess is the way I would think about that. And I like thinking about authenticity and different relational partnerships, I guess, because the way I am with my husband is authentically different than the way I am with you guys, and is different than the way I am with my parents and my brothers and my friends.
Absolutely.
But there is still that those core values that I hold true to myself that transcend all of those relationships where some rise up and others fall off because of necessity of that relationship and how that relationship is.
In that idea, is there then a negotiation or a dialogue to be had between individual versus group authenticity?
If it's warranted, I think, yeah. And if you feel like it needs to be done, or if you're uncertain of what that relationship is, like maybe you had an idea of like this relationship was going somewhere for me, but this other person didn't want that.
Right.
That's when that conversation would open up to something more, but you would have to breach that barrier and actually have that conversation to open up the door for an authentic relationship with that individual. I have a living example that I've lived that example. I was in college and I had a really bad crush on a classmate of mine, and he and I would take time after class and shoot pool and talk shit because we were both really loving the philosophy courses we were taking together. And I clicked with this guy really, really well. And knew from interactions that he was a queer man, and said, hey, I really like you, but I really, really actually like you. And he let me down gentle, which was nice of him. But I felt like the relationship we had got to a certain point where unless I actually came out and said something, because I had this feeling well up in me every time I saw him, unless I'd said something, I couldn't genuinely be his friend because I was holding this heart piece back from him. But once we had the talk and cleared the air, it's like, yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, you're cute, but I'm not interested. Okay, cool. And we went right back to being friends just like we had been. And it was a genuinely beautiful thing because I got to express that part of me. He accepted that part of me. And then we both got to set it aside because what mattered more was authentically being friends than being anything else. And that's awesome. That's not the case for a lot of situations that are like that. One side sometimes harbors resentment. Other sides harbors fear of every action that they take around this person. Am I leading them on? Am I drawing them further down this hole? Am I potentially hurting this person? Those are all conversations that need to be had in order to have a more authentic relationship with one another. And some people just aren't capable of that, and that's okay. But you cannot force them to be okay with that either. Right. You have to meet them in their own authenticity. You have to meet them at their level.
So I'm going to throw a question out there that will resonate with the three of us, I'm sure then. Do we compromise our authenticity when we do things, especially spiritual things, for money?
No.
How about even if we're just doing it for the public as opposed to ourselves?
No.
Because we're figureheads, we're elders within the community, where we are automatically held to a higher standard because of our standing within the community.
Well, that is precisely the nature of the question to a certain degree. So because one of the things that I thought was interesting when I was looking this stuff was it was a quote from Pastor John Pavlovitz about his Christianity. And he says, I gradually crafted a renovated, sanitized version of myself suited for public consumption in my church. And with it, the table of my hospitality in a very practical way began to shrink.
Oof.
I mean, I can't speak for y'all, but and most of our listeners know that there have been times when I have slipped up and said an inappropriate word or two, and I have been corrected either by you guys or the guests. And you legitimately asked me if I wanted it cut from the recording that we released out to the public. And I said, absolutely not, because I was corrected and I fixed the error moving forward and became more attentive to the word and my word usage from then on. But I also wanted to keep that in there for transparency's sake. I want people to not forget that we're human.
Authenticity would mean authentic mistakes as well, right?
Exactly. And I own that mistake. I own the fact that I fucked up and said that word. And I have tried very hard to remove that word from my vocabulary since, and several others, because it was brought to my attention that these words are harmful to certain individuals. And again, I apologize for any pain or hurt that I caused anybody. It was not my intention, but learning from our mistakes and growing from them, I think, is a major part of being authentic to yourself, as well as the community around you, and being transparent about those mistakes. Because once you get to that point of like, I'm perfect, I don't make any mistakes, like, you're going to slip and fall on your fucking face. Like, if I slip and fall on my face walking into the room for the first time, then cool. I did the worst thing possible. The only place left to go is up at this point. So, it's the whole miscongeniality thing. If I walk out on stage and just eat shit, then I'm like, cool, I'm good. Let's keep going.
I don't know. Go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually, kind of bringing this around to some sort of response to Caitlin's earlier question. For me, I think authenticity, despite a lot of the other definitions and forms that we've read, for me, a lot of it boils down to clarity, whether that's clarity of my own motivations, it's clarity of other people's motivations, it's clarity about why I'm acting in a certain way. I mean, like, if I have clarity about things I've done or damage that I've caused or why I'm putting on the customer service voice, if I have a level of clarity, to me, that automatically brings a lot of authenticity to it. Now, whether that's going to shine through for others or not, I don't know. And I'm not, as soon as I start worrying about whether it's shining through for others or not, then I might not be authentic anymore.
So we were talking, and there was a spider that descended in front of my camera. And she kind of prompted me to think about the webs that we weave together and how authenticity is kind of part of the webbing, because when we authentically tie ourselves to people, when we make these valuable connections between each other, there's push and pull on all these lines. There's push and there's pull. And that tension is what makes the web stay where it is. It's what makes the web useful in catching prey, right? Well, if we think of this in terms of Earther, what Spider is trying to tell us is the tension of authenticity, I think, is part of the lesson of tying ourselves between people, community members, family members. Well, I mean, family scaling up and down depending on chosen or not. And the authenticity of that family is entirely on the relationships that you choose to maintain. There are plenty of people in this world who have cut ties with their blood family, but have authentic, genuine ties to people in their community to where your clan, your family, your A tier, you are together. And those connections that are chosen might be woven better than the ones that were there by default. Whether you're talking about deconstructing Christianity from somebody that's a convert to polytheism, animism, paganism, whether you're talking about somebody that's come out of the closet and is expressing themselves in new and exciting ways, and they're full of these neo-pronouns, and they're trying on all these different ways of expressing their gender, their sexuality, and their ideas. Sometimes authentically finding yourself is only found in that tension between yourself and the community, yourself and who the greater society thinks you should be.
Yeah.
And sometimes internal and sometimes external conflict is part of the process of finding out who and what you are before you can even live authentically. Digging down into that, tying those webs together is
that's an interesting analogy. I like that, because if authenticity is found in some of those tensions, then my mind says that that's extrapolated even further than the people and the communities and even the other spirits that we interact with. There's anchoring points within the various aspects of ourselves.
Yes, this is an active conversation in queer communities right now, because there's a bunch of people that are coming into the community who don't have contact with the last generation of queer elders because a good chunk of them died during the AIDS epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you then formulate your identity? Well, a lot of these kids are coming out of, and I say kids with all due respect, some of these are not genuinely children anymore, but some are coming out of situations where they are having to deconstruct their Christianity at the same time as they're constructing their concept of who they are. And that provides some very fertile ground for some of the performative purity tests that we've been seeing coming out of that community.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it in paganism as well,
mm-hmm.
because there are some people that are still having to slough off the Christian baggage in order to authentically embrace their whole self as a pagan. And some people never do, and they still live authentically, but a lot of the process of living authentically as a polytheist, an animist, a pagan, etc., in some small or some great regard, depending on your personal history, requires you to take that anchor point out of Christianity and put it somewhere else. If we think about constructing a new web, you have the choice to leave the anchor point there, but it may not be suited to the new web you're trying to make.
No, I can see that, but at the same point in time, that's not something that would be 100% true all the time, right? Because without the authenticity of your Catholic upbringing, it would very much affect the authenticity of your heathen practices.
So that's why I specifically use the term deconstruction.
Okay.
Because it is a renegotiating, not a dismissal.
I think that's an important point that even I miss sometimes.
Yeah. So I live within the Haminga of my ancestors. I live within the orlog that my ancestors set down. I was born a white cis male. I was raised a Catholic. There are certain parts of my orlog that are completely unchangeable because I was born, I was assigned male at birth. I have all these things that I understand come with the package of growing up as Tim.
Mm-hmm.
And renegotiating my identity as Sarenth required me picking up a lot of threads and moving them around, while still understanding those used to be anchor points of identity.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I like that.
It's part of what I love hearing about your yoga practice, because you show very clearly where your physical anchor points are at when you talk about it, whether you're talking about pain or expression, and sometimes how you've had to pick up those threads and move them so they're more suited to you.
Mm. So my question to you is, because spiders often build only one web per evening or maybe a few days, at what point in this journey for somebody who may be walking it, is it necessary for them to uproot the entire web and start fresh? Maybe they have an anchor point that doesn't fit somewhere. Is it okay to take it out and cast it aside?
Absolutely. I think that sometimes taking out the anchor points and saying no more of this, while really, I think, a hard point in life. Again, deconstruction is an excellent example of this, but also cutting certain toxic community members out or renegotiating where you are in the physical landscape, literally moving, can be an uprooting of that anchor point to weave a new web.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you said that. And I asked that question specifically because though like your Catholicism is still part of your past, you know, people who are coming out of Christianity or some of a more toxic family lifestyle and coming into the lifestyle of a found family, those aspects are still part of your web at some point.
Yep.
But you can take that anchor out, remove it, and replace it with a new anchor of a similar vein, of a similar web.
Spider actually gives me a lot of hope because she is consistently reconstructing her web based on what's the best place to catch.
And repairing. They will actively repair their own webs, which is awesome.
Yeah. So I actually want to take 5 seconds aside and thank the spirit of Spider for contributing to the conversation and bringing us a lesson.
Also, thanks for freaking me the fuck out because you made Sarenth look real close at his webcam while I was talking, and it scared me. I was like, what am I saying? What am I saying? Am I saying something bad here? What's going on?
She was literally crawling down the lens of the camera. I was like, what the hell is that? Oh, that's awesome.
You know what this conversation reminds me of is what I always found fascinating about the Peruvian, the Quero definition for Pachamama was it's not just Mother Earth, it's our home in space and time. And so today's Pachamama isn't yesterday's Pachamama. It's a different, spider webs are kind of the same way, and so is authenticity. What was your authentic self yesterday isn't necessarily going to be your authentic self today or tomorrow. The spider's web from yesterday might have been its authentic web at the time, but it's no longer a lived experience. The new web is. So in some ways, I might only define the lived experience of the current web as authentic.
I think that's where a large part of this conversation has been kind of been aiming towards as we kind of talk through and ask each other various questions is the fact that there is no true definition for an authentic self besides the words authentic self, because who I am today is different than who I was yesterday. In many aspects of the terms. You know, yesterday I probably had a bad day. I've had more bad days this year than I've had good. So that one I for sure can say was probably maybe not a bad day, an uncomfortable day. Today was a better day. You know, the authentic self that I am today is honoring the authentic self that I am today. You know, I'm stepping a little more comfortably in my own feet. And whereas yesterday it might have been a little more scattered, but I was authentic to that scattering. So I think authenticity is very difficult to pin down for many reasons because it is so fluid, because it is so interchangeable. It is so personal and individualized, even within a larger community. Different communities are more authentic to each other than they are to other communities. I think for me, being authentic is just, and I always return to this, and I'm sorry that I'm a broken fucking record, but having an awareness or an understanding of who you are. And it doesn't even have to be an overarching understanding of who you are as a person throughout your lifetime, because I'm not the same me I was as a teenager. And I've said this many times. I would beat the fuck out of that child if I ever met her face to face, and she would win. Okay. She would beat my ass into the ground. Not going to lie. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up is like, oh, this person is different than what I remember them being. They're not authentic anymore. They've changed. It's like, no, you're right. They have changed, but that's a good thing. I think being authentic to who you are and allowing those changes are important. exploration of self is important. It's also an authentic trait to explore oneself.
Yeah. I think by allowing ourselves the grace to change, and we extend that grace to other people, we don't become locked into who and what we were.
And I think understanding that who and what we are is not written in stone.
Mm-hmm.
It's written in sand. And you can rewrite who you are every day. It might not be wise to do so. Maybe sit with that person for a few days or a few weeks or a few months. Really get to know that person. And then if you don't like it, cross it out or let the waves carry it away and write something new.
This is why I have a lot of hope from Spider, because we can maintain our identity. We can make new webs. We can do all these things. And we are still genuinely the spider, authentically the spider at the center of these webs. That provides me a lot of hope for, as people explore who and what they are, who they are in relation to community, who they are on their own, and what levels of tension they will or won't allow on their web between them and community, between them and other people and in their lives. A lot of people are renegotiating these boundaries around jobs, around what they will or won't allow for work-life balance, around what they will or won't allow for relationships with blood family. A lot of people are in the midst of renegotiating how their webs are even woven and what the tension requirements are.
I was just contemplating that because there's so much dogma, especially in spiritual spaces, around the word authenticity or being authentic, I wonder if perhaps sincerity might be a better word. Because I was just looking up, it crossed my mind, and sincerity, at least we'll go back to that dictionary definition thing for you, Sarenth. As Webster defines it, it's the quality or state of being sincere, honesty of mind, freedom from hypocrisy.
Ooh. I kind of like that better.
Yeah, I think sincerity and authenticity actually could go hand in hand.
I agree.
Yeah. I
have to be authentic to be sincere.
Yeah, I was actually, what does it mean to feel authentic? I'm still kind of, the reason I got to sincerity, I was kind of mulling around that question. And would it feel better for me? Would it be more reflective of how I honestly feel authenticity if I were to combine clarity with sincerity as my goal?
Yeah. I could see that. I like authenticity as a word.
I think my only issue with sincerity is that sincerity can be faked by a talented artist.
True.
That's a really fucking good point.
Whereas authenticity cannot be hidden, really. If somebody is talking a certain way, but their actions don't meet up with that, then they're being inauthentic. That they're being shady or underhanded. But the best actors and actresses out there, you can see it. They do it all the time. Even people, especially when they want something, can be genuine and sincere in their actions for however long it takes to get whatever it is they want. But if you're authentic, eventually those words will falter and not follow up with your actions, because you're still going to do the things that you want to do, even though you're being really sincere about it.
I love how we poke holes in each other's statements. I really love it. I love it because it's a consistent renegotiation, right? And I love that we're constantly bouncing these things back and forth, because I get it. I do. Something that came to mind when sitting over here flapping and shit, because my brain just hit something that I've seen crossing a lot of online spaces. what is an authentic piece of art versus a sincerely produced piece of art is becoming an active question in terms of art production because of AI. And you're seeing this also with the production of like Chat GPT is now being used to make essays and shit for schools. What is an authentic document versus a sincerely produced document might come down to whether or not you actually made the damn thing and it has flaws. Or it could be a tell that you're not being authentic, because if your character art has 6 hands and you didn't intentionally put those in, or not 6 hands, but 6 fingers rather.
Well, yeah, I was going to say count the fingers.
Yeah, count the fingers, see how the legs are shaped. Because what they're doing is a lot of these art AI programs, they're pulling from photographs and they're pulling from JPEG data. And they're not necessarily the keenest on just how many fingers and toes people have. But that's because a lot of people do bust shots.
Yeah, that's why they have those the 4 square pictures where you find the ones with all the stoplights in it. AI can't quite figure that out.
Yet. So that to me is a really interesting question of, you might sincerely believe you're producing art, but are you authentically producing art is also a question. Are you putting, to me, this is a relatively simple question of, are you actually putting lived work versus taking from other people? You might sincerely believe this is my beautiful piece of art, but is it authentically yours? Not really. Not if you're cobbling this together from multiple sources and smushing it together into your own piece. Now you could say, well, what about collages and da 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 da? I think the difference is that you're actually putting the work in.
Well, and then you can also have the argument of like, I used this art piece as inspiration. You can see it in my artwork, but it is not I took these pieces from these other pieces of art and mushed it all together to create this piece of art kind of thing. If that makes sense. It
makes sense.
The difference between taking inspiration from something, and because there are very few artists out there that I know that can actually draw from memory.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Like, some people will say, well, what's the difference between using an AI program versus using a reference photo? And I'm like, okay.
The human hand that drew it.
Right. Like, I could literally trace a reference photo and use that in my art. And a lot of like manga artists do this on the regular. Well, they'll pay for an asset and then they'll put it in their manga, and it'll just be like traced and dotted up per the usual shading effects and stuff like that. That's not a problem, because that's fair use. That's the artist that took that photo being compensated for their time and energy. They are authentically reproducing this piece for their own use. The problem is that we have fake art being produced, and then the people who produced the original art that's based on are being stolen from. So, well,
before we wrap up this conversation, Caitlin, do you want to read out a couple of the questions that we've had in the Discord chat?
Yeah, these have been good.
They're actually both very good, and I think we did touch a little bit on both of them. But Cunion asked in our Discord, do you think your level of authenticity has changed over time? If so, did you work on it specifically, or did it come along with you or with other growth?
Yes, and yes.
Yeah, yes, basically across the board. Some things slapped me across the face and I went, oh shit, I fucked up. Other things grew organically on their own, without me paying much attention to it. And other things I had to tend very closely, and am still tending certain things. I'm still working on aspects of my own authentic self.
Yeah, I agree with that. the thing is that sometimes we don't realize that we're being inauthentic until it's hindsight. So you have to grow and change in order to understand where you were coming from, in order to understand where you are now. So like authenticity has to change along the way.
So authenticity is a negotiation between who you were, who you are, and who you want to be.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, that's such a great definition. I love it.
Ooh. Ooh, that gives me the shivers. I like it.
It gives me the good shivers. Very nice. Does that answer your question or answer that question for you, Sarenth?
That was the first one she asked, right?
Yes. The second one is, did you work on it specifically, or did it come along with other growth?
So yes and no. I mean, there are aspects of my life where I can clearly point to and went, I worked on that. For instance, Freya saying you need to go and do the group therapy queer sessions at your college. She laid that down as a challenge to me and said, "You're working on this." And I went, "I have to?" Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
She's real good at that.
So hail to her, but damn. So did I work on it specifically? Depends on what we're talking about. I authentically embraced my queerness in no small part because my gods shoved me to, not because they shoved me into being queer, but because that I needed the prompt to authentically embrace who I authentically was. And I know I'm overusing the word. It's kind of like tongue in cheek, but yes, I needed the shove so I could actually be myself.
Yeah, and sometimes that shove comes from God. Sometimes that shove comes from human beings around you that you realize you hurt with your actions or your words.
Yep. So, depends on what we're talking about. If it came along with other growth, part of me being able to even have that conversation with Freya to begin with required me to step away from my Catholicism. I could not be authentically queer and be part of the Catholic community as I experienced it growing up. So my past self was sitting there with these experiences. My present self was sitting there going, I'm not sure what to do with these feelings. And then my future self is like, come this away. And the gods helped clear space for that.
Yep. So the last question we have from the same individual is, what do you do when you feel uncomfortably inauthentic in a situation, either because of social needs or because you haven't resolved the issue within yourself?
God damn.
Very good question.
Very good question.
I will tell you what I do now, because what I do now is very different from what I used to do. As soon as I realize that, because it's that saying, old habits die hard, sometimes you do slip into a former self, a past self, because even though it is a past self, it doesn't necessarily mean that person is gone, truly. But if I do find myself falling into that person, I will immediately stop and be like, oh, hi. I don't want to be this person, which means I don't want to be in this situation. So I'm going to fuck off. Goodbye. And I'll ghost them. Or if there's somebody there that I genuinely care about, then I'll tell them, hey, I have to go. And probably not tell them why, but make up. No, I wouldn't even make an excuse. I would probably just be brutally honest and be like, I don't like being here. I'm going to go home because I want to be home anyway. But the only time that I wouldn't do that is if I was in a situation with like my family, because not everybody knows that I'm pagan. Not everybody knows that I'm bi. Not everybody even in my family knows that I had a girlfriend for 2 years plus and was planning on marrying her. I would adjust to the point of myself being comfortable enough without sacrificing too much of myself with this person, because it is I'd say it's probably two individuals, with the idea in mind that I don't want to flamboyantly throw myself out there because I know it would make them uncomfortable, but I will still stand firm in my opinions and my ideals should the conversations arise. I won't seek them out. I won't seek out fights with these people. I won't seek out these conversations with these people. But if they do come up, I will be honest and I will be truthful in who I am as a person.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I mean, I think if we're talking like Sarenth, where it's a constant renegotiation between the past and who you are now and who you want to become, then those moments when you're feeling inauthentic are really, I hate to sound cliche, but it's a huge fucking blessing, because that's a moment of clarity that allows you then to go seek out those renegotiations. It allows you to look within yourself and look for clarity. It gives you a chance to feel inauthentic. It's really kind of a blessing, because then that it gives you a chance to seek out the authenticity that you need.
Yeah. When I feel uncomfortably inauthentic anymore at work, oftentimes it's because people assume certain things about me. And sometimes I'll correct them, and sometimes I'll let them figure it out. There was a point in time where I didn't have these tattoos, for instance, on my arms. So these runes that are all over my arms, they weren't there once upon a time, and I was working there. In order to be an out pagan at work, I had to reaffirm with people on the regular of what I was, because they would talk to me and assume that I was in the same boat as them, that I was straight, that I was Catholic or Christian of some denomination. And sometimes sitting in that space and being inauthentic and letting them talk to me like I'm one of them gives a lot of fucking insight. I've had white supremacists who see my tattoos and think I'm one of them. And it's like, no, we are not the same. But it has given me insight. Sitting in that uncomfortable inauthenticity with them long enough gives me insight into their mindset and what they're valuing. So in the sense of understanding people who are essentially opposed to my existence, sometimes running silent and letting them speak their mind gives me tools.
So basically, you are allowing yourself to slip into inauthenticity to discover their own authentic selves for you.
I am sitting in my inauthenticity long enough for them to show me who they are.
Yeah.
So when I was mentioning earlier with one of the things that Othin was talking with me about realpolitik and the mask of civility, this is one of the things that he was talking with me about, in that sometimes sitting in that inauthentic moment and putting on the mask of, oh yes, we are not saying we're the same, not agreeing with them, but just letting them run their fucking mouths and assume we're in the same boat, will give me insight into why they think what they think. And the next person that I encounter that I can have a dialogue with, I can hit those points and maybe bring them over to my side. I have actually had dialogue with heathens who held fairly racist beliefs and didn't know it until somebody sat with them in this, what I consider to be an inauthentic mindset regarding heathenry, and deconstructing that with them. Sometimes in order to be your authentic self, you have to sit in your inauthenticity and the discomfort. You have to wear the mask just long enough for the other person to get comfy and listen.
Kind of what I do with my Catholic boss.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell him that I was heathen. I didn't necessarily tell him everything that I do. I just said, I believe in other,
Mm-hmm.
It's just out there, and let them come to the waters with a word, and they said, so you're spiritual. And I said, sure.
So sometimes I do this because of social needs to answer the question directly. And sometimes there have been times where I still use the term cis on myself, even though more and more I'm feeling this tension and I don't think it's resolved yet. So am I living as an authentically queer man? I don't know yet, but that's a negotiation within myself and in my community that I'm already having. I know that there's part of the issue is that I don't know if the inauthenticity that I'm feeling is because of toxic masculinity or masculinity. And having to dig into that requires me to sit in what could be an inauthentic mindset for a while.
Yeah, I really do like your use of the term negotiate.
Yeah,
that,
as well.
That really resonates well with me, because when I thought I was fully lesbian, thought I had, was not ever interested in males ever again, I struggled with that for a really hard time. And it was only, I would say it was within the last 5 or 6 years, and I always struggled with my femininity of like, I don't wear makeup. I don't really do my hair. I don't wear dresses. I don't wear the pretty flower stuff that girls wear. And for some reason that made me feel really bad. And I couldn't figure out why that made me feel bad, because I'm a girl. I feel like a girl. I feel like I'm in the right body. And I look at it and I'm like, but why don't I like dresses? Why don't I like these things? I feel like I should. And I realized that whatever that was societal pressures and the pressures of the people around me, and people telling me, well, that's not ladylike. It's not ladylike for you to cuss. It's not ladylike for you to sit with your legs, your knees spread, even though it's more comfortable on my back to do so than it is to cross my legs. It's more ladylike to paint your nails and have long nails, even though I worked in the auto industry and have often ripped my nails right off, which fucking hurts. And et cetera, et cetera. And I had a negotiation with myself that I would wear the clothes that I liked and thought were pretty and thought were comfortable. And that would be my authentic self, which is jeans and a t-shirt. I don't really go further than that. Sometimes I might throw on a nice shawl because I love shawls.
Mm-hmm.
I have some feminine aspects to my clothes, but predominantly I don't. And I'm fine with that. And that was a negotiation I had to have with myself to fall into that realm of feeling, that authentic feeling and understanding of my gender and my feeling around my gender.
Well, this has been a really good conversation. I know I'm losing bandwidth, unfortunately, so we're probably going to have to wrap up here, but I really enjoyed this, and I kind of hope that if our listeners like this format of the three of us tackling a topic, let us know. Give us some feedback on that so we can consider doing more shows like this. I found it really insightful, actually. It's given me a lot to work with in my own personal life. I'm going to go contemplate that. And I really like the spider analogies. I like the analogies to Pachamama, and I really love the negotiation definition. I think that's fantastic and works in so many contexts, whether it's from the physical self all the way to the spiritual work. I like that a lot, Sarenth.
I got to give credit where credit's due. The notion of negotiating and dialoguing with the past and the present and the future it's something that I held inside and something that I understood, but Tyson Yunkaporter and Rune Hjarno Rasmussen in their dialoguing with each other gave me the words to express. And I really want to express my appreciation for that. And I also really want to thank Spider for coming in and kind of breaking through where we were at and showing us a new way to weave together. That was really, really cool.
Yeah, that was great. And thank you, as always, to our wonderful. Oh, before we go, last thing. There was something I keep beginning to bring up. Sarenth, I believe you are going to convocation. You want to plug anything that you're doing there?
Yeah. Give me like 5 seconds. I got to remember what my damn classes are.
I'm teaching something and it's got stuff in it.
I'm teaching like 4 different classes. Let me see, where's the order? Please.
While he's looking, Caitlin, are you guys doing the Nordic Fire Festival again?
We are. We will be going to the Michigan Nordic Fire Festival in Charlotte, Michigan. We do that every year. It's the one festival that Matt really enjoys going to, and I enjoy it as well. And I get to dress up like a Viking. So, and this year we're dragging along his daughter. So, his daughter and her husband. Now they're married.
Oh, awesome!
And they got a baby on the way.
Oh, wow! How about that?
I want to be a Meemaw times 2. But yeah, I don't do anything there besides walk around and look cool. So,
right. Well, maybe people can find you there and join your entourage. You can have a whole group of followers.
Yes, I would love it.
Did you find your stuff, Sarenth?
If you can figure out which one.
Yeah,
is me.
I'm just bringing it up now. Sorry.
That's all right.
I ended up. So for those who have been following me on Twitter, I also have opened up a Mastodon account on pagan.plus. And so if folks want to also find me there, I do some like microblogging, although funny enough, our instance has about 5,000 word count per post. So yeah, it's long story short, sometimes I'll do microblogging on there. So I have 4 classes. I've got Encountering the Runes on Friday at 9:30, which is the runes are often looked at as simply a divination tool. This workshop is about approaching the runes as spirits in and of themselves. So we're going to explore the lore, what it can tell us, how to interact with them, and appropriate offerings of communication, and delve into deeper aspects of rune work from a spirit-based approach. Like I said, is at Friday at 9:30. Friday at 4 p.m. is being a spirit worker. What is a spirit worker? What things can a spirit worker be called to do? What duties and responsibilities might a spirit worker hold? How do I know if I'm being called to being a spirit worker? So we're going to be discussing these things and exploring these questions and other basics of what being a spirit worker is, including boundaries, finding effective means of spiritual communication, building networks of support, and skills to being an effective spirit worker. That's going to be Saturday at 2 p.m. Calling to the Ancestors is Friday at 4 p.m. And that's a workshop and small ritual at the end. So how do we call to our ancestors? Are our ancestors just flesh and blood, or can they be those who brought us to our path? Why do we call them? So this workshop explores these questions and basics of ancestor work, including who they may be, ways to call on them, and how we can involve them in our daily lives. And then the last one I have is To Swear, to Witness, to Hold, Oaths and Metaphysics. That's going to be Saturday, February 25th at 9:30 in the morning. I'm going to be doing this with Mother Multiverse, and we're going to be talking about the metaphysical nature of oaths, how they affect fate, luck, and spirit, and the consequences of making, breaking, and witnessing these mystical contracts.
Awesome.
A warning to people who are going to be attending: while you will not be required to make oaths, they will be made in front of you, and they're going to be witnessed as part of the class.
Ooh, awesome.
Yeah. So I am looking forward to that.
You guys look for Sarenth at Convocation, then look for Caitlin at the Nordic Fire Festival. And as always, thank you everybody for your constant support, your patronage. Thank you for leaving those positive reviews and for sharing the show. We appreciate it so much. And until next time, when we see your authentic self around the fire.
has no right.